being recorded. Over to you, Gurpreet.
Right. So I'm just sharing my screen, and I think Roshan, you were not present in the previous PAT call. So in the previous PAT call, we were discussing what are some of the priorities for this year for Bahmni, and this is a document that is being shared in the top thread also. In terms of the priorities, we have some initiatives that we have defined for the upcoming quarter, which is for the next 3 months, and the items which are in blue are the ones that we've already like prioritized first, and then the others are going to get picked up. So we are looking at some of these items here, like as an example, the light release that was just discussed. We are looking at incremental redesign of the consultation app, the whole clinical piece incrementally going up with the new design, and the patient dashboard and the consultation. Those are the parts that are going to get modified first, and some of your requirements around privileges and role, those would get kind of added and considered as part of this incremental rewrite also. Uh, we are also looking at doing a Bahmni standard release, which is basically a release of all the hospital-oriented, components, which is Udo, Ellis, and so on. And that is where Udo upgrade, which is moving away from version 10 to version 16, is one of the items that we prioritized for the first quarter, because that is a sub-component that is being used a lot. And if you see the YouTube recording that Anshuman has put for the last week's PAT session, we discussed Udo quite a lot in terms of how I think we should basically upgrade to Udo, because Udo is very strongly currently coupled with Bahmni. There are quite a few modules that the Bahmni team has written for Udo. So the idea was, as first part, we wanted to ship Udo with version 16 with lightweight integration, so that the patient information, the various master data, those all get automatically synced into Udo 16. The second phase would be where there would be new modules created for Udo 16, but there would still need to be some analysis done on whether there is any possibility of an upgrade. Most likely, it will have to be either a manual upgrade, or people will need to, adopt the new modules from V16. But Udo 16 is a priority for us. If you could talk a little bit, share your, why you think Udo 16 is needed. What are some of the functionalities? I think that would be helpful for us to just hear.
So Roshan, is it more because of the Python 2.7, or do you feel there is certain missing?
Yeah, one of the part is Python, and another part is Udo 15 and 16 are more smoothly and easily run comparatively Python 10. Sorry, Udo 10.
Is it in terms of smoothly, when you mention smoothly, is it because, do you mean more that installation configuration is better, or is it like, some features, for example, that you find useful?
I tested Udo 16. There is a if I run any like application and reports, so they have features of case data, which also smoothly run.
I didn't understand that. What feature you're talking about?
Mm, uh, if Udo 10, if I process anything that call the 10 different tables, in Udo 16 that called only 3 tables, so I feel smoothly also.
Okay.
It seems the response time of loading certain data on Udo 16 is faster than what it is in Udo 10, because the underlying table schema seems to have been changed, or they've created some, reporting tables, either of the two.
Right. So Roshan, one thing is this, right? Like, we understand that migrating from ERP is like, is not a easy job, right? And our effort has been, can we keep compatibility, right, with the older supported system? So for example, recently we are helping one organization migrate, and they are using still Open ERP 7. They are one of the earliest, like, adopters of Bahmni. And we were able to integrate with the latest version of Bahmni, right? And that is because, like, we ensured that, like, backward compatibility was ensured, like, across systems. Now, there is substantial work that needs to be done. Odoo 16 has also improved technically, as you would have realized, right? There is better, like, UI development support. There are better API supports. You can now actually easily write a module, for example, which allows you to plug in your own REST APIs, etc. So we'll be definitely evaluating this. But migration is always, for such ERP system, is a must be a well-informed decision, right? It's not a random one, because migrating Odoo to databases is not an easy thing at all. And nobody actually ever recommends that a unattended, fully automated approach. There is an open upgrade, a software open source solution, for example, which you need to use, go from, like, say 7, 8, 9, 10 incrementally, for example. And it's a quite a time consuming process. So many cases we just say is this, start from the new financial year, right? So we'll come up with some sort of a guidances like that as well. But typically when you say start from the financial year, you essentially just get your absolute master data. You get your outstandings, for example, receivables. You get your customers, for example. You do a stock taking exercise, and which means, like, now it is as good as, like, starting fresh with this master data available. Now in our approach, what we thought is this: the first cut would be like more like what we have done with creator invoicing in Bahmni Lite. In Bahmni Lite, what we have, for example, we synchronize the master data, which is primarily patient. That means any invoicing that to be done, somebody needs to do manually, right? So there is no draft quotation that we create. And in our first cut, for example, we might do just that. We will just synchronize the master data, which means any products or services, customers, for example, patients as customers in Odoo. That's as much as we'll do. And which means that if you are going to take Odoo 16, it might mean that you now need to manually create quotation and go through the sales inventory process. Now, Bahmni provides a lot of other utility modules, right, which essentially eases the work, right? So typically in Odoo, what you do is you raise a quotation, and if you have to follow exactly their process, which will mean, hey, you then convert it to a sale order. As soon as you raise a sale order, for example, a dispense request will be sent to the warehouse. Then you go to the warehouse, for example, and you dispense. Then it gets reduced, for example. You also register payment, and you say, okay, how much money, what is the form that you are doing. Now, Bahmni, for example, provides a bunch of utility modules, which basically makes it seamless. You just say confirm sale, and most of the case, the next step that you have to do is just register payment. That's it. And every other inventory, for example, is automatically reduced. Dispensing is automatically done, right? And all the other things that are associated, like, with the inventory and other stuff. Now, this we may not get out of the box, right? At least in the first cut. Will that be useful for you? Because that will be a bit of unlearning for your users, um, if they immediately move like say Udo 10 to Udo 16, say next version, would users say, no, this is not workable at all?
Yeah, I know Udo upgrade and migration is not easy. We recently do ERP to Udo in Boilpata Hospital and Cherry Hospital. It's not easy, but Udo is not only billing; it's much more.
Exactly.
So uh, if we upgrade the Udo, there is a much more options also available is in there. So Udo upgrade is important for us.
Right. No, but what I'm saying is this, if we do the bare bone integration, would that be useful thing for you to go live? Right. Because even in that case, much of the things you still have to do manual. Right. So what I'm
Yeah,
saying is the manual is this,
I
you
know.
do the sale order, for example, like, then you'll have to register the payment, then you need to dispense, for example, right, you need to approve this. There are 3 4 steps, for example, which Bahmni basically, with this modification with the Bahmni modules, it shortcuts. So you would
Yeah,
not have those.
yeah. In the case of Nepal government hospital, we also create a D button in the OpenMRS site, so
Right. Dispense, huh?
which directly sells and delivers also
Okay,
in
right.
own button. Yeah,
Right. And I remembered that you guys also integrated with OpenMS,
yeah,
right, and you pull certain information from Odoo also.
yeah. Uh, uh, Now we integrate with OpenEMIS and uh, in insurance system who is patient data and information bill automate at us and send with one click is in image system.
Right. So all this also needs to be relooked at. So what I'm saying is this, imagine we come up with Odoo 16 integration in the next version, right? And it's a bare bone,
uh,
which means you have to also parallelly work on this,
yeah,
right? And
yes,
you probably have to do a feature parity check, right? Whether like, that works or not,
okay,
right? Okay, but I think it's good, like, to know if you guys want to try this out. So whenever we are discussing about all this, we start working, we'll also pull you in. We'll try to, make sure that, you are in the loop as well. If you want to contribute, for example, you're more than welcome. Um, but that's the thought right now. We haven't really slotted in terms of the what releases or something like this. It's just the discussion for 23 24.
okay. I talk with my team also and if any kinds of support we can do, we all are ready on this.
Okay.
That's good to hear. Thanks, Roshan. I think just follow a little bit of our talk threads and our pat calls. And the moment the team picks up Udo, which will likely be next month, my guess is mid of next month or end of next month at max, when they start the Udo work, maybe you can help us in terms of testing and validating some of the work that's happening.
Sure.
Is there any other? So you brought up 2 points, Roshan. You spoke about the ability to have dashboards at role-based dashboards access, and you spoke about Udo. Is there any other question, suggestion, or point that you had from your implementations?
Mm, Not for it, but if I found any other things, I will say it.
All right. In Slack channel, we have a roadmap. Roadmap in Slack, we've got a roadmap channel. You can even come there. Just showing it to you quickly in case you haven't seen. So this is the roadmap channel where some roadmap related discussions have started happening, and it would be good if you come up with a suggestion. You can also come here and ask a question, or you can of course use the top thread.
Roadmap. Okay.
Okay, so the next point, shall I go on, Anshu, to the next one?
Yeah. Yeah. Unless anybody has got any other comments on Odoo. Guess not. Okay. Please.
Yeah, so one of the other items which is on discussion is Senate LIMS versus OpenLS, right? Currently, we have been shipping Bahmni with OpenLS, and the OpenLS version that we are shipping is actually being maintained by us only. And we haven't done any new real feature addition to it for quite some time. And ideally, the way Bahmni is structured, we would like to package, mature, um, stable, active open source products. And the version of OpenLS we are shifting is not being developed. Now, there are two options. One is OpenLS Global, which is the, let's say, the new forked global edition version of OpenLS, although it looks almost the same as the current OpenLS. And then the other one, which is much more widely adopted and popular, is Vika limbs slash Senate limbs. And we've seen that generally a lot of the movement in open source world has been towards adoption of Vika limbs or Senate limbs for a lab information management system. And Akhil's research also around this, last 2 years back was around the fact that Senate LIMS is much more mature, better integration with lab analyzers. It has a stronger bacteriology module, which are all things which are missing in OpenLS, and it is a much more widely adopted product. Its tech stack, as I remember, I think was PHP. So just thoughts, any from the group here in terms of OpenLS Global versus Vika limbs slash Senate limbs. And then of course, in either case, there will likely need to be some discussion around an upgrade path also for existing customers.
So, by the way, Senate LIMS is also like on Python.
It's on Python. Okay.
It's on Python. So, which is okay because obviously creator is on PHP. But yeah, which is okay because we also have Odoo, which is in Python.
Right. Agree.
So there was some reference already done, Gurpreet, right? The implementation. So it's not that we need to start from scratch, right?
Yeah. So there are two reference implementations. One that is here itself, done over HL7. Here I put some links also around some of this work. This is a top thread where they posted about how they have integrated Bahmni using Mirth, I think, and HL7. Right, so it sort of creates an HL7 message and sends it to Senate, and then Senate sends. I think I don't know if I think they did like an email based integration to pull some of the information back. So we do have a reference implementation. We may have to validate some of this. And I think MECOM has done an integration using Camel, routes, and that's the other integration. We would have to ensure that we do a Fire / HL7 standard integration so that it is not just like Senate specific, but any system can sort of integrate then with Bahmni.
Yeah. My only hesitation of following the MECOM approach was like, it happens directly from the databases, right?
Yeah, we're using that database logs to define, and we'd rather use an event-based sort of approach.
Yeah, because I mean, that's been the ideology of our system design, right? That each system does what it does best. Each system can query other systems, and we want to be able to communicate to it through potentially an event that something has happened. Then it's up to the other systems to pull this information, do whatever they want. It's just the patterns of the integration. I think I am not too sure with Camel, because that happens right from the database, which means there is no provision for access control. I mean, I'm sure you can do other levels also, but uh, uh, sort of say ETL or MySQL log, synchronization is probably not something that I would prefer personally.
Does anyone here have any thoughts on Senate limbs, Beaker limbs, their experience versus OpenLS Global, or any history on why possibly Ozone chose Senate limbs and not OpenLS Global?
In OpenLS, there is no option for bacteriology record right now, so we can switch to Senate.
Yeah, that's also another gap that we have, and Senate has, I think, Akhil, Senate supports bacteriology, right? Microbiology.
Yeah. Uh, in ELIS, we
Yeah,
can
it
record
does.
microbiology right now.
Yeah, it does support microbiology. Plus, it can also support bulk handling of samples, which is another, may not be very useful in the labs that, the scale of labs that we cater to. But yeah, that's another beneficial feature that, a bigger hospital comes our way.
Hmm.
I mean, in for instance, during COVID, such pandemic scenarios or specific program scenarios, also it feels like if you had the ability to do bulk import or integration with bulk testing analyzers and others, it would generally be beneficial, even if the facility is like mid-size.
Hmm. Although, Akhil, wouldn't lab analyzers do that? I mean, it's not about upload, it's about that's specifically what a lab analyzer can do, right? I can load up with multiple samples and essentially it all generates
Yeah,
data bulk, right?
yeah, you can do that, but sometimes there are labs which are collecting samples at sub centers, and then
Hmm.
all of those are sent like you have these Apollo labs which have multiple collection centers, and all
Hmm.
of that is sent to one central lab for testing. And over there, when they enter the sample into the system,
Hmm.
uh, that's where this functionality comes handy.
Okay.
Because they might not have nodes at each collection center where they are collecting sample and entering into the system.
No, that's fine. I'm saying even if so that's a common practice that you collect sample somewhere and it is actually in all the lab chains, that's what they do. They'll have sample
Yeah,
collection. It's not that they do it over there, but
yeah,
eventually all this are sent to their lab, for example, and the lab they use an
yeah,
analyzer. But the fact
yeah,
is the analyzer is able to do all the bulk testing, right?
yeah,
Across for many patients
absolutely,
in one shot. And then eventually the
absolutely.
analyzer says, here is my data. And then if you
Hmm.
have HL7 interface engine like say Mirth Connect or something like this, that it can handle in terms of integrating with say LIMS or so.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. But Roshan, is that how do you handle microbiology right now requirements, like say in your hospitals? You use the bacteriology module on the clinical side.
We use clinical side notes for microbiology, and another one is we create a small module in Udu, but both are not a good practice for us.
Okay.
It's
In
just for recording and reporting, but not a good practice.
okay. Why wouldn't you use the I don't know if in bacteriology this thing in Bahmni itself? Bahmni has got a client. This thing I was wondering whether, and this was specifically done because we didn't have open. I'm not.
Are you going to bring it up here, Anshu?
Can you just log into demo, for example? Um, I wanted to figure out.
I don't think it's
So-
enabled on our demo.
This is a demo.mybumni, right? It will be there. Yeah.
So the
Go to clinical.
bacteriology that we have is not really a full-fledged
Sure.
functionality. Yeah, it does not capture sample results at multiple time points.
Hmm.
So like at 24 hours, at 48 hours, at 72 hours, it does not do that. It just
Hmm.
collects at one one single point of time.
I thought it did that as well. That was one of
No,
the primary requirement because, like, the culture test is a so key thing in
yeah,
microbiology. So, for example, this is what, no, you can add different samples, right?
you can add different samples.
Then you can do the same thing and just so yeah. So anyway, I mean, you don't have to try this out, but Roshan, seems like you are not using this feature, right?
We are not using this feature because here is the only collect the sample and sample ID and consultation note is in there. In
It will
case of
alert.
bacteriology, there is a multiple option like if result is equal to A, then go to C, and then result is equal to A, then C, then another result is that. There's kinds of reports are entries in by bacteriology section, so that's the difficult to handling right now.
Okay. Okay.
It's multi-conditional values are there, so we don't use this feature.
Okay.
Cool. So yeah, I think so. There is a reference implementation for Bahmni to Senate LIMS integration. The code is available. People can try it out if they want to, but it hasn't been packaged as part of the Bahmni product release. So I think the idea is we want to package it and possibly make sure that the integration is done over a standard, both an event-based, possible and HL7/fire, so that it's not just limited to Senate limbs, but it could be extended
Yeah.
easily for any other lab information system. All right. Then these two are okay. I think I've just kept them around. Upgrade to Java and upgrade to Postgres version 15. Bahmni Mart was something that we discussed last time, which is the analytics tool that is now already available on our demo servers for people to try out. There's also a video that the team has posted that gives a slightly better, use case for people to understand what Bahmni Mart is, and I think this would be basically quite helpful for people who are wanting to do custom reports or custom analytics around this. So this also shows, how you can use SmartDB for querying data as well as for creating visualizations and filters on the go and then saving them. But we've got more use cases to be created so that out of the box people can see dashboards and understand how all of this connects. Like you create a form and how the forms for each of the data entered, different visualizations can get created. So there's some more work to be done on Mart. Even from a security perspective, we're going to create a reports user and ensure that that user doesn't have access to sensitive OpenMRS tables. So we've documented how to do those things, which is not very difficult actually, but we would like it to be like an out-of-box default posture so that people don't, make mistakes.
Right. And this sample, like, use cases that you talked about, views, etc., these would be based over the standard data, like from the OCL.
So the thing is, right now, at least for the Bahmni Lite scenarios, they are going to be based off the OCL data. So the sealed dictionary that is being shipped. So let's say if we are looking at COVID-19 as a use case, and we want to have some forms like a COVID-19 intake form or a long COVID or a COVID death form. Based on those forms, we would want to have some analytics created so that people can, in a facility, can say, all right, in this population area for people with these comorbidities, this is what we saw in this age group or in this gender. So that's the kind of analysis that people want to do for long COVID. And sealed dictionary, as Andy mentioned last time, has certain concepts, of course, a lot of concepts related to COVID, but also concepts related to long COVID. So those would be interesting to map out, because then we can show use cases around research or surveillance and build them into metabase through these forms and diagnosis and dashboard. So that's an area that we want to work on more in terms of Bahmni Mart. And sub team in a way is working on this, and Mart seems to be also getting a lot of interest.
Right.
So I think we need to make
Yeah.
sure we have.
Yeah. And also some of the cases like subsumption cases that Andy talked about, if you can adjust that also in terms of the model, that will require not just defining the like it's the end results, as in like I'm talking about the reports as an end result, but I'm talking about even in terms of the Mart model, we need to accommodate that first.
Right. That's true. Agree. Mart would need to be able to understand some of these hierarchies, or at least one level hierarchy, like this is a this is a child, so that it can at least do that level of rudimentary, be done. Eventually, though, most people would want to export data even out of Mart to be able to run it in a tool like R.
Right.
So I think that is where the eventual goal is. So again, Metabase and Mart are being targeted more for intermediate analysis, the ones that where people are going to do like SQL based analysis and dashboards and so on. But I guess true analytics requires, R like or Python like capabilities. And there we our philosophy, as you had said earlier, has been like Bahmni acts as the data capture system, and then people should be able to easily export and pull information out, and that could act as Mart could be that source of data, and then they import it into more complex analytic systems.
Right. Would would you think about like, supporting say DHIS2 integration from Mart? So OpenMRS has got the DHIS2 module, right? I think a few years back, I don't remember who was it. Daniel might know. Um, this guy from Sri Lanka worked on this on the module, the older OpenMRS module, and it was updated as such. But the challenge still remains that, like, defining the data sets and defining the queries in OpenMRS is really difficult. And that's really the problem that Mart is handling, right? It says
Right.
Flutter is essentially, it is now easily queryable. Not that, like, we are taking away, for example, the any querying aspect. We're just flattening it so that, like, we can put some tools like say Metabase, Superset to make that job easier. So doesn't it make sense also to do integration to DHIS2 from there? We already, I think, have DHIS2 integration from Mart, but only for indicators, not really for data sets.
Right. So yeah, I think in general, exports to DHIS2 from like a reporting DB or an analytics DB would actually make sense. It will be easier to map from MartDB than it is from OpenMRS DB. So that part is also true. And I think there have been some attempts on extracting Bahmni data and integrating with DHIS2 multiple implementations. I think even Nepal is doing it. It would be good actually if we can trigger a DHIS2 integration initiative this year to showcase how that is done. I think the challenge usually also is on the other side, right? Like on the DHIS2 side also, there isn't a standardized structure. So the way that integration has to be done is that it should be easy for people to define that integration pattern or integration mapping so that it actually works for your DHIS2 server.
Right. Right. By the way, I'm not sure whether DHIS2 has that capability. Like, just like say in Bahmni, we can map, right, through this interface terminologies, reference terminology. We can do some level of mapping. DHIS2 doesn't have anything of that sort. Right. So their definitions of the data elements, for example, even if we use a standardized, like say, things, right, like it's not going to be that easy. So one of the thing, and you would have seen that in the OpenMRS connector module also for DHIS2, is that visually you can now, and DHIS2 provides all these APIs. You want to know about the, say, particular data set definition, you get to know, you want to know about a particular data element definition, what are the different category options are there, what are the different slice and dice you can do all this. And OpenMRS connector actually provides and way for you to query DHIS2 and, like, define this mapping visually. We had done similar sort of a thing in Bangladesh as well, while working with the Ministry of Health. And it was same, connect to a database, for example, connect to DHIS2, and then you map, okay, this location is actually this location in DHIS2. This data set, that means that this is my primary data source mapping. This is how we define, say, a data element, for example. So if you can bring off some of this learning, it's not going to be easy, but I think in the end, it's going to help the end users.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think it makes sense. So Mart can definitely act as a good source for DHIS2 integration, and definitely something that we want to actually provide out of the box Bahmni DHIS2 integration and make it easy. So yeah, that's definitely something to look at as we move forward with Mart. In the interest of time, I was hoping if you could just, Anshu, give a little bit brief on multi-tenancy as a summary, because this is another important issue that we want to tackle this year, especially to allow people to do like a cloud-based deployment where they're supporting multiple facilities through one or just two instances of Bahmni, and the databases can be separate per facility, but if it's like a small facility, even that shouldn't happen. And we
Right.
want to basically reduce both. One is the maintenance effort of managing multiple instances, as well as the infrastructure cost needed for running, Omni. And therefore, multi-tenancy becomes important because I see it could reduce 10x to 20x cost, as well as the overhead of maintenance, upgrade, rollout patches, all of that thing. But from a multi-tenancy perspective, I think OpenMRS is the piece, because
Yeah.
that's like the master source system for all other downstream systems, and other systems like Odoo, Bika Limbs, Crater, they're already multi-tenant in one way or the other, and it's just OpenMRS which isn't multi-tenant today, and that's where I think we need to like spend some effort in making it multi-tenant ready.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, this is coming up as a requirement, right? Unless the more cloud-based, hosted solutions are becoming reality, right? And more, I mean, even from the regions that like say 5-6 years back, where people would say, no, internet is really bad. Even they are thinking of going to the cloud, right? Okay, I just put it up all over there. Lesser maintenance if I find the right partner to do this. Many of these places are so interior that finding a support partner to go there or even have a remote access, for example, becoming a challenge. So I think especially for SaaS, this multi-tenant must be solved. I mean, one is obviously from the cost perspective, but even in terms of the maintenance, perspective, uh, it has to be. You can't be running, for example, the entire cluster of all components, say for 200 clients, right? Because if you, in that case, if you start counting the pods, I don't know how many pods we have per cluster, but let's say even if you have 5, this is about maintaining, observing, making sure this 5 into 200, which is about 1000 pods uh, to be done. I mean, to be taken care of. So multi-tenancy, I think our initially one thought process was, can you think about a logical partition using some sort of a partition key? Some systems do it, but if you need to think about such things, typically such logical partition key, this must be done right from the design perspective. It cannot be ad hoc based, for example, retrofitted to an existing solution easily enough. Right. I'm sure you can do that, but it is going to be difficult. So initially we were thinking about hey, can you think about some partition key in the patient, for example, which say which center they belong to, or can you use some sort of a OpenMRS has got a relationship, for example, with a patient, and you can define the relationship with say with a particular center as well. Do we leverage that? But I think more or less we are looking at this initially, but I think what we think is we are dealing with health data. It is best that this data are actually physically separate. And is best, for example, it is also great for, especially for a SaaS service, or somebody says and I want to disengage. Imagine, right, the trouble, or even if you somehow goof up of in the removal of the patient data, because you will have to say, hey, write a script, remove this data, for example, from all this table where the partition key is this. And that can get messy and really challenging as well. Whereas if you are maintaining with a separate database, it's just okay, you are disengaging, I am just going to remove the database, right? And
Yeah, that's true. I agree. Backup requirements can be different. They might want to actually move
Exactly.
from the cloud to a data center, so generally having database separate is
I
better.
just give
And
them the data dump, for example. Even if you want
yeah,
to create a data dump on a like logical separation, that requires a lot of other work as well, right? It's not so easy. So we think that separate database is the way to go. Now, Spring actually provides many of this out of the box, like multi-tenant connection pools, connections, etc. So at a broad, I mean, there are obviously a lot of testing needs to be done, but even in some sort technically, there are some 4 or 5 things that we have identified that needs to be solved. One is obviously enhancing OpenMRS core to make sure that we can connect to the right database for a request dynamically. That is one. Which means like actually the connection will be to a specific database. In MySQL, database is just another one. So it is like OpenMRS 1, 2 as such is like, as such in Postgres. However, you can do with different schema as such. But essentially either it's a different schema or it's a different database. The connection is made only to that. We did raise some talk threads and there was like, one thing that came up. How do you now bootstrap a particular client, right? Because as you know that when you start OpenMRS, all the different modules essentially, run, they execute their own migration scripts and eventually bring your database to a state, right? How do you ensure that such a thing is repeatable? So one such thought was, see, in many cases, we actually start with a snapshot database, right? That can be one way. The other way, it can be like, hey, on a different node, I will spin this up. This will create the database. Then that particular node can die. The database would have been already created. Then all I need to do is this, go to my cluster and say, hey, this is the new configuration. So all this, and I think like, with the Kubernetes and all this stuff, for example, it is possible that I can have another Kubernetes spun up, for example. And when that Kubernetes node, like, sorry, not another Kubernetes cluster as such as a single node, I can say, okay, if this new one spins up, I'm going to like, the older one is going to die down, right? So such things are possible. So that's one part. So database is definitely one thing that you need to sort out. OpenMRS also use a lot of search based on the Lucene index. These are like, files created on the local file system. How do you now do this? Because the request can come to the same node from two different, like say, clients, for two different hospitals. Now, one way to do this is this, and Hibernate has got like, support for free text search, and that's what like, OpenMRS leverages for Lucene. Hibernate has got out of box support for both Lucene as well as the Elasticsearch. So we can easily think about like, say, like, moving all the searches onto say Elasticsearch, and then it's about writing the right query with the right and Elasticsearch has got have solved this problem. There are multiple approaches you can do, but there are way to do that. And this is also useful because on the cloud, you don't want to load up a particular machine so much. Remember, all this Lucene things happen in memory, right? So it requires significant resources. And you don't want to do it on a single machine. It's probably better that like, you spin up another pod, the pod is dedicated. I can provide like, separate resources and other capabilities onto it. And other systems just query by typical HTTP request APIs. So that's another problem to solve. Searching. which I think is possible from whatever we have investigated. Third is in terms of documents. Again, on a cloud, for example, you would probably want to do S3 or some other document storage, but those also need to be partitioned by client, which is the third part that needs to be done. Fourth part is in terms of the basic session handling. So if a request comes in, OpenMRS has got the session. How do I identify which database to connect to? All right. How do I ensure that even if somebody steals a session cookie, for example, and makes a call, and then they can send whatever cookie they want and other stuff, how do I ensure that the server authorizes the right hospital or right clinic access for a request? So these are the four, I think, the top level ones that we need to technically solve. I think these are solvable, and uh, especially in today's world, I think is very much need to be worked on. Thoughts. I know that Daniel is here. I know that Rafal was supposed to start looking into some of this aspect. I don't know whether you have made any progress on that front, or there's any discussion that has happened.
I don't think he has. I think he has not yet got time to look into this.
Right. So if this is in our radar, because these are all core capability, right? It would be very much like to do this. Actually, one of the coalition members, IPLIT, has already done a very rudimentary. She has obviously hacked around and done not so perfect ways. She hasn't taken care of the connection pool. But essentially, now the same app server can connect to the multiple DVs, and based on the request, they are using just I think the path context somewhere they're passing, but it can actually query multiple databases from the same app server. So if OpenMRS is interested, we would very much like to collaborate on this.
Yeah, definitely that would be something we'd love to get in.
Right. Great. There are other things, Gurpreet, also we discussed in terms of one of our requirements, diagnostic report, for example, enhancement using FIR diagnostic report. The current model is actually very restrictive. Um, I don't think it is going to work out. Nobody actually handles diagnostic report submissions. Currently the way it is done with the Fire 2 module. So we need to have a different profiles, but this are probably small things can be independently handled.
Yeah, I know. I'm just searching for that talk thread. I think you or Priyanka raised a talk thread on this. I just found it. I think this is the one.
Yeah. So we know what to do. We also caught up with Peter beginning, couple of weeks back, and they also haven't got any made any specific progress. They used a different approach, used the Fire exchange module they have written, and using the task resource, but they essentially registered a different endpoint. We'll have to see on that front. But I think some of the things that Priyanka has already broken down, those can straight away be absorbed. And I think we had a presentation or discussion with the Fire community, OpenMRS Fire community, and people were in agreement that this would be good to have.
Cool.
Cool.
It's 15 minutes ahead. I have
Yeah,
to also
sorry
log
about
out.
that. Yeah.
And,
Yeah. So, do you think like, we need further discussion? We can take the next PAT call also. But you are not
yeah,
going
so
to.
the thing is, yeah, I'm not there, but it's okay. I mean, I think the thing is for quarter 1, we already have potentially our hands full. We know what we have to focus on. I think what is needed is discussions for post that period. What are some of the other things we have to prioritize? I posted some possible backlog item, overall wish list on the talk thread and roadmap channel. If people can, talk a little bit more about some of the other upcoming items, that would be good. But right now, it feels like given our team size, um, we have enough to do.
Right.
Cool. Thank you then.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you. See you next week. Stay safe, stay healthy. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.